The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian from Bringing Down Security. This week is part 2 of our discussion with Kim Crawley. She was here about a week ago on the 13th to talk about her book, which is coming out in paperback on October the 5th. It's called 8 Steps to Better Security, a simple cyber resilience guide for business. The ebook is out currently right now. If you wanted to go and get it on Kindle, it's $18 on Amazon Prime. There's a link in our show notes if you want to go grab that. And we finish up talking to her this week about asset and testing. And the question I started out by asking is, if you're not a security professional, what are some of the goals that you should expect when you're wanting to do things like implementing security? So we're gonna jump right in here where I start asking her that question, and hope you have a great week. Right. And I think if you're not somebody who's necessarily in security and you pick up your book, what's a realistic goal? So let's say you're not a CISO, you're not a security person, you work at a startup, somebody who does photographs as a service. They give us their digital photographs and we do stuff with them or something. There's a lot of data there. You're processing people's pictures. God knows what you're processing of people's pictures. So there's some security there, and you as a PM or you as a graphic designer may realize, hey, this is some pretty sensitive stuff. Maybe we should be doing. As somebody in that kind of role, how would you set those goals and say, hey boss, here's somebody's, pictures of, their tryst in their bedroom. Why, we're just leaving these out on somebody's, file share. I mean, how do you, what is a logical goal here? And how would somebody work towards that if they're maybe not even maybe not a CISO or even a manager?
Obviously, you and I and most of the people listening to this podcast know that there's no such thing as perfect security. So we can't obviously have perfect security as a benchmark. Improvements, any sort of improvement in your security posture is worth it. We all understand the concept of security maturity, about how it builds over time. Any progress made towards security maturity is good. And I explained the security maturity concept in the frequent security testing chapter, because you work in pen testing, so you understand that a company needs a certain amount of security maturity for pen testing to be appropriate. Mm-hmm. So yeah, any sort of improvement, that's the end goal.
Right.
But I make it very clear in the book that you can't be a company with great security overnight. It's a process. It takes time.
That makes sense. I was just thinking along the lines of doing things like potentially like gap analysis, or, if the goal that you want to do is to make sure that, whatever incremental changes are made, if you're, hey, we're processing all this information, maybe we should put it in some security, or, I think imagine on the location in your organization, how big the initiative or the security incrementation would be.
You need some benchmarks, right? And the benchmarks are going to vary wildly depending on your industry, the size of the company, many other factors. If your company is a little Android, iPhone, mobile game developer, for instance, maybe the benchmarks are to make sure that the games that you're developing never leave the company's computers until you're ready to release the game. Mm-hmm. For instance, it could be uptime metrics on your on-premises network, on your cloud network. Uptime is a very important security metric as far as I'm concerned, definitely.
Right.
It could be lots of other, it will vary, right? There's no one size fits all solution. It'll vary depending on what you're doing, what kind of computer network you have. But I think security testing is a really important part of determining some of those baselines. Even if a company does not have the security maturity for pen testing, vulnerability assessments are appropriate for all companies, all networks, even from day one. So maybe, because vulnerability assessments are generally based on specific security standards. So maybe you start with whichever well-known security standards may apply to your organization.
Right. Mr. Betcher and I used to work at a company where it was definitely, it seemed like compliance started the security efforts. We dealt with some regulatory guidelines and such. And then it was like, the problem I saw with the compliance stuff was they only wanted to meet compliance. They didn't want to go beyond that. So trying to yes, huge problem. Yes. Especially when you lose one of the champions of trying to get all of that stuff implemented, who had been the compliance person. I apologize if he's listening. It's not Mr. Betcher. It's somebody else, but if he's listening, I do apologize. Yeah, you could have helped us get better, sir. So anyway, but yeah, I find that, you're often forced to implement security because you've had a bad compliance evaluation. And that's a sign of maturity, right? If you're big enough where you're actually having to start dealing with those compliance or regulatory requirements, that means somebody's taking notice of your organization, which means you're more important now. You stand to, have more risk. And the compliance things are to try to help manage that risk or lessen the risk, but you can't do that without implementing also some security or doing, threat analysis and risk controls. So
in some situations, a company might not be able to avoid a security audit, like
right.
PCI, as you keep saying, like PCI DSS. You absolutely must be PCI DSS compliant if you're going to be a Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Discover, etc. payment. You don't have to be a payment provider. If you accept those methods of payment and you don't delegate it to a third party like Stripe or whatever, then you absolutely must be PCI DSS compliant. And if the payment card industry association does a security audit on you, they're not going to care that your retail store has only existed for a few months.
Right.
If they see gross violations with how you've implemented your POS system, they might take away your ability to process credit cards.
Right. Right. Or they'll charge you more for each transaction, which if you're not making a lot of money on those transactions to begin with, that can cause you to lose more money in the long run until you've gotten better. So yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Let me see. Data protection. Yes. This cloud reader for Kindle is not the easiest thing to use. So I want to go back to section 2, chapter 2. I don't know if you had been on the internets in the last couple of days, but there was a tweet that had come out about a job description.
Oh, I've seen that one. Yeah.
I don't know how many hours. I must have spent a good hour and a half last night on LinkedIn because I was like, I know it's a LinkedIn. So I was trying to filter on entry level. I was trying to, 10 plus years of JavaScript and what have you. But yeah, when you're talking about the hiring, the security team, my wife and I were talking about some of this too. And I think we came to consensus here that we try to hire ourselves, which means we try to hire, especially in this case, the entry-level thing was obviously not an entry-level job. It was more, I would say, almost like a senior manager or senior developer in this case. looking for an entry level. So they were obviously either trying to hire somebody like themselves, or they actually just let
Entry
HR.
level, 10 years experience, HTML5,
Right.
7 to 10 years experience with a bunch of other web development technologies.
Yeah. I worry about that, because it's like, if you don't know who or what you need to hire for, how can you effectively hire for a security team? Who is the first person you need to hire for your security team? If you're building this out according to your chapter 2, who is the first person? It's obviously not a CISO, I would imagine.
Well, a small company might not have the resources for dedicated cybersecurity professionals. In that case, if there's a network administrator, and there isn't anyone more senior technical than that, then the network administrator is in charge of your company's cybersecurity. Basically, my criteria is whoever in your company is the most senior when it comes to IT, that they are in charge of, they are ultimately responsible for your cybersecurity. If you do have cybersecurity professionals, whoever is the most senior cybersecurity professional on the team.
Okay. That sounds great. The only problem is you're going to have the senior IT person with another hat getting paid the same amount of money, and now you've added a shit ton of stuff to their plate. Instead of hiring somebody new, network administrator, you're it. Here's another $30,000 to take on this new, job role. Maybe we give you a new title or something like that.
I know that is a huge problem in IT, is people being given too little pay to be responsible for too many different areas of IT, to work 80 hours a week, and it's ridiculous. And I feel for you. In some really small companies, cybersecurity is ultimately a part of all IT roles. You're all dealing with information. It's information technology, and securing it is important. If you just want to make sure that your network is being administered in a secure way, then that would fall under the network administrator's purview. A desktop support agent or help desk agent, that role could be related to cybersecurity in some way. If one of the people in your company says, "Oh, I think I've got a virus," and it's the help desk agent's job to look into that problem. If a company is in the situation like you described, though, which is a very, very common problem, because companies are cheap. And so they would much rather, pay one guy $100,000 to do the job of 5 people who should each be paid 6 figures. Right. In that situation, definitely hire, bare minimum, a security analyst. Bare minimum. But it'll all depend on what the network operations are, what the company's operations are like day to day. Right. If the network admin is in charge of cybersecurity, and cybersecurity has become too much work for them to be able to do that and be a network admin at the same time, hire someone, definitely.
Right. I was thinking along the lines of, there are CISOs as a service out there. There's people that will do part-time CISO work. Company I used to work with, Leviathan, does those. To
some extent, an MSP. I go into MSPs in the book a little bit.
Right. Those are if the MSP can't necessarily help you with that, then they can help you with monitoring or with additional risk reduction. They may also be able to give you advisory counsel to say, okay, you need to hire this person. I think the bigger issue is we don't necessarily know what we're hiring for. And that's why we get the 10 plus years of Java, client side JavaScript or what have you. We just don't know what we want, or we're looking for a kitchen sink, and all that does is cause further issues.
I get into that in chapter 2. The way I approach it is I believe the mythical cybersecurity skills gap is a myth. That doesn't mean that people don't need to train and upskill. I work for a company that is all about cybersecurity training. So there definitely needs to be cybersecurity training of all kinds.
Right.
The problem is the myth of the cybersecurity skills gap is a company says, we can't hire for this role. We've been looking, we've been posting on LinkedIn, and then you look and it's like, wait a second. You're leaving that role vacant because you want to pay a CISSP 30 grand a year.
Right. Right.
So I that and the ridiculous job postings, I make up a fictional ridiculous job posting in chapter 2.
Nice.
So the 20 years experience with Windows Server 2016, too little pay, entry level role needs to have a CISSP, so on and so forth.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and when you decide to have an IT person, if your company's too small to do security, they have to be trained in security.
Yeah.
You know, you in the CISSP, you have your CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, integrity, availability. So in the world of IT now, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if you take security out of it, all they're interested in is availability, right? That one leg of the triangle. They don't know how important confidentiality and integrity are.
I get
sure,
into
they
that.
know of them.
I make a point of that in chapter 2 as well, that companies want obviously a unicorn. They want someone with all the skills from day one, and especially if you demand a lot of like really, really niche skills, you're not going to find the job candidate who needs zero training. Right. So it's very, very important to invest in your employees. I even mentioned in the book that companies should sometimes certifications can be really important, but maybe for some roles, especially entry-level roles, consider hiring someone with no certs. Consider for an entry-level role, hiring someone with no certs that shows a lot of promise, and pay for their certifications. I know there are some business leaders out there who would hear that and go, blasphemy, but
yeah. I've always one of the things that I did, I looked at the consultancy where I used to work at their job descriptions, and they, some of the descriptions for a security consultant was like, must have had experience in a development environment, and must be, have code commits and stuff like this. And, one of the things that I was working with last year with regards to that, and I think we had Katie Moe on, was people will not apply to jobs that some groups will not apply to jobs unless they feel like they can tick every box on that list. And then there's some folks, I mean, that will just, I got one of those things. I'll just throw my resume out there. And I mean, and sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. But you writing a good job description, I think is more than half the battle here. And if we treated it like buying a house, for instance, if you put a house up for $800,000 in a neighborhood that's only $300,000, you're not going to get anybody buying that house. You're going to have to reduce what you're wanting, or what your want or what your ask is, until you get into that happy medium. So if you're throwing up like 15 years of Kubernetes experience and whatever, and nobody's coming up, or you're getting, stuff, I don't know why we're not finding quality applicants. Maybe you should, see what you can do to modify the job description to make it a little more useful. Maybe we don't need 15 years of Kubernetes experience. Maybe we need only 10, or, and keep whittling that down. Or, maybe get on Twitter and ask people, things. Hey, I'm a hiring manager. I'd like to hire for this position. can I put down 20 years of Kubernetes experience? And they'll laugh at you, but hopefully you'll find enough people that will be able to tell you probably shouldn't do that. Entry level, 1-2 years, maybe, if any, must be able to, understand cloud technologies, for instance, for an entry level position. It's really important, and I think social media could help with some of that. If people in companies without a dedicated security team, or maybe even people in a security team at a big company that's having trouble hiring, would come on to Twitter and say, "Do our job descriptions suck?" And we'll probably tell you yes, and hopefully we'll be kind enough to help you rewrite those. But those are, like writing policies, job descriptions are some that should be looked at on the reg to be fixed, especially if your group is hiring and, you came in here like, what I'm doing right now does not reflect in my job description at all. And, writing those in such a way to help with better hiring will only help you and your team in the long run, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Let me see. Mr. Betcher, do you have any questions?
Let's just skip chapter 3. Regulatory, come on.
Yeah, nobody wants that. Nobody likes that. That's not fun. Nobody wants to deal with that. No, I wanted to skip to number 6, where we're talking about data assets and data protection.
Yeah.
But somebody already beat me to it.
Well, I mean, there are other components to it too, right? Like,
yeah.
It's not just inventorying your data assets. I go into physical security. We've already mentioned the CIA triad. I think every single book that is about cybersecurity in general must mention the CIA triad.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I just, inventorying your data assets is part of it, but I also kind of use that step as like a kitchen sink chapter. We need to cover these other things, everything that's related to accessing your data. People overlook physical security. Physical security is very important, right? I get into topics like business recovery and disaster preparedness. And
how important is disaster recovery and business preparedness in the world of the cloud? I mean, we have a hurricane, but our stuff is in several accessibility zones, or it's, on the West Coast and we're 3,000 miles away. I mean, is availability and resilience still as important now that most everybody's in the cloud, or does it only matter if you still do the on-prem thing?
Obviously, there are a lot of companies where most of their network is in Amazon's data center or Microsoft's data center or Salesforce's data center. But that company, it doesn't matter how much of a company's network is on the cloud. They're going to need at least something on their premises, maybe a few endpoints on their premises. Bare minimum, they'll have a couple of endpoints on their premises. Right. If your company's office was in Lower Manhattan and they just had those really colossal floods, well, it's great that most of your company's data is on Amazon servers, but if your employees can't show up for work because their computers in your on-premises have been flooded, you're going to have to build a new office in order to access your Amazon network again.
Right. Yeah, I guess if your VPN concentrator was, somewhere in an office that got flooded, then you're SOL. Yeah, that makes sense. But that's why everybody's doing zero trust now, right?
Yeah, zero trust is a great concept when it comes to authentication, right? But floodwater doesn't care about perimeter or authentication, or floodwater just floods.
Right. Yeah.
Also, you have to think about, like, if you have just one vendor like Amazon for the cloud, well, what if Amazon decides one day they're not going to host your stuff anymore and they're going to shut you down? Maybe your
Excellent
CEO
question.
said something that they don't like or whatever, right?
I mean,
Right.
I think I mentioned that it's very important to have local backups.
Hmm.
That might not be feasible for a lot of companies. They may not have enough local data storage to back up everything that they have on the cloud. A lot of companies are, I find a lot more common these days, companies are pursuing a multi-cloud approach.
Right.
One of the problems with multi-cloud is to convince your company that you should be paying for multiple cloud providers though. And then it's integrating it all. So
Right. Yeah.
redundancy is crucial. So I make a big deal about redundancy in chapter 6.
Cool. Yeah.
If you can have a multi-cloud environment and full on-premises local backups, that's ideal. It might not be feasible for all companies, though, obviously.
Yeah. About a month ago, I think me and Miss Berlin, I think this is while I was on vacation, we posted the show about doing incident response. Or no, Mr. Betcher and I did the one on incident response. We talked about budgeting for, everybody's like, oh, test your backups and everything. And it's like, well, that takes time, effort, and resources, which you may end up having to pay for depending on which cloud you're in. That's additional, time and effort that you probably haven't budgeted for. And that happens on top of all the other things. So, reminding, your IT department or your security department to budget for testing your backups on a semi-regular basis is just something that, oh, I didn't think of doing that. That's a great idea. Or, oh, we need to, restoring those backups may find issues, which would then, cost you more money because it's like, oh, well, we did the backups, but it didn't fix X, Y, and Z, or, those are things that will bite you in the ass if you actually have to implement them and you've never tested them and you find out, oh, we lost firewall config, or, oh, we lost all these things and we didn't back up the right things, or what have you. So budgeting for that, time, effort, resources are all very important for resilient organizations. Of course, you could also just flip a switch and move from one AZ to another, or like you said, move from one cloud to another. They do offer 99+% uptime, but it's still your ass on the line if your cloud provider can't manage those uptime deals. Plus, it reduces the chances of malware, supposedly. So, you can do local backups, but even with the ransomware stuff, if you've got to restore from backup, it's still going to cost you some money.
Hopefully your
regardless.
local backups are only connected to your network when you're transferring data.
That is correct. That would make the most sense. Yeah. I think we're getting close to time here. Was there any other parts of the book that you wanted to highlight before we left? I know in chapter 9, you kind of bring it all together into one nice bow, tied up with a bow. What does that look like in this case?
Chapter 9 is for the busy business person who has hopefully read the rest of the book and just needs a reminder of what ideas are in each of the 8 steps. So chapter 9, the afterword, is literally a Cole's Note version of the rest of the book. And I also recommend books on each of the areas for further reading, because this book is an introduction to preparing your business to be more cyber resilient. So if you want to explore any of the facets or ideas in my book further, I recommend other books as well.
Nice. Very nice. Okay. Mr. Betcher, any other thoughts before we take off for the evening?
No.
Okay. Like we said, the book is available on Kindle format now as of 12 September. The paperback version, if you want that, will be out 5 October. 2021, and the audiobook will be forthwith as soon as we figure out who's going to be doing the audiobook. I did volunteer for it, but I don't have a good voice. And nobody wants
quarter 2021 or first quarter 2022.
Okay, that's very cool. How many pages does this book have?
A
Because
little over 200, I think
okay,
217, something like that. Yeah.
okay. Oh, hey, look, the Cloud Reader has locate. The one thing I never did like about Kindle was they gave you locations instead of page numbers, but it looks like they have page numbers now. So I don't know if they're counting the entire book, but they do say 205. So I don't know if they're counting things like table of contents and index and what have you. But yeah, 205. And this may be a great book that you would want to potentially give your non-security boss for Christmas
Perfect,
or
because
something.
that was, I was thinking that's my audience, business people, not
Right,
necessarily technical people.
right, right.
But
Or
find out if they like audio or they prefer paper, Kindle, all
Or
that.
they
right,
prefer a paperback copy to be shoved in the CEO's office.
right,
Yeah.
right. And also in the insert, on the bookmark, right? www.breakingdownsecurity.com
Yeah.
the episode with Kim Crawley on it, so they can hear from the speaker. So Kim, are you going to be speaking virtually or in person anywhere in the near future? I know the COVID stuff
I
is still
don't
up in the
know
air.
when this episode is going to be released, but I have my own cybersecurity event called Disinfosec.
Oh,
And this year's event is taking place this coming Saturday, September 18th.
okay,
So I don't know if this episode releases after that, the YouTube videos will be up
okay,
if you missed the event. But if this episode was released earlier, go to disinfosec.tech, disinfosec.tech. And the gimmick that I have with this event that differentiates it from other cybersecurity events is it's all disabled people talking about
okay.
security.
Disinfo.tech.
It's a disinfosec.tech. It's a
disinfosec.tech. Okay, very cool. Yeah, part one of this, and I'll make sure I mention this on the first episode that this is happening. So this will come out hopefully in the next day or so. That way we'll be able to get that. So this part of the show will be on the same weekend as disinfosec tech conference. So yeah, hopefully people will have gotten notice ahead of time. And this is a virtual event, yeah?
Yeah, completely virtual.
Okay. All right.
Twitch
So
and YouTube.
yeah, disinfosec.tech. Yeah. Oh, MongoDB is a supporter. That's pretty cool. Good for them.
Yeah, I got a
Okay.
corporate sponsor and I wasn't even looking for one.
Fantastic. Okay. And I'm assuming you're going to be doing this. It says, oh, you're going to be doing it on YouTube and Twitch. So if you don't have a YouTube or a Twitch account, go get that, get that set up if you don't have one. I mean, everybody's got a YouTube account probably, but not everybody has a Twitch or cannot always see those things. So how would they find you if they wanted to know more about disinfosec.tech or maybe the book itself?
That's
maybe
the URL, disinfosec.tech. That's the URL of the website. So
okay.
all the information is on the website.
Okay. And at disinfosec on Twitter as well.
There is a disinfosec Twitter. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. And if they wanted to talk to you specifically about the book or, hey, this was a great book, a little, feedback, how would they get a hold of you?
I live on Twitter. So just message me via my username on Twitter is Kim, Kim_Crawley, Crawley. And I am on Twitter at all times that I'm not bathing or sleeping pretty much. So best way to get a hold of me.
That's good to know. Good to know. And also make sure you check out Hack the Box blog as well. They're pretty awesome people. So go and learn something. So there you go. Mr. Betcher, talk about what you do on the regular basis.
Full-time job, but I have a piece of software that helps with incident response.
Oh, that's very important.
Yes. It's called LogMD.
Right.
Yep. Log-md.com is the website. So go check it out. It's free. You can download it and run it for Windows systems to find a lot of things that you wouldn't normally find when Windows by default doesn't log very much at all. So that'll help you guide you in the right direction to set
You
up
just
Windows in a way that if some event happens, then you'll be better able to find out what it was.
you just
Right.
solved a really big problem with that application.
What's that?
What's that?
Proper Windows logging.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So check out the website. It'll tell you how to implement proper Windows logging through either group policy or all the advanced settings that LogMD and where Michael and I have documented. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. And you're on Twitter where?
At Betcherpwned. BOETTCHERPWNED.
Excellent. All right. So for those of you who listen regularly, we had one episode before this one that was a sponsored podcast with Blumera. We had Miss Berlin, who works for Blumera, had said that their marketing people wanted to come and do a talk, and so we're entering into a limited partnership with them to do some discussions, kind of like how we did with Lumio last year. And so, yeah, we might have inferred a specific product that likes to modify log, parameters and logging in Windows boxes during that show, Mr. Betcher. So you might want to keep an eye out on that. So, so Miss Berlin, she does a lot of work and advocacy for mental health in our industry, which is always helpful. She's done a few workshops this year in the physical sense at Hacker Summer Camp. She also did one at Blue Team Con. I want to say they were going to do one at Wild West Hackin' Fest until it went virtual. She may still be doing something with them. I am unsure, but if you are interested in knowing more about the mental health initiatives that Miss Berlin and her org are doing, you can follow them on Twitter at Hackers Health. And you can follow Ms. Berlin at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. She also has a tabletop incident response game based on a famous RPG, Celts and countrysides, or dwarves and Darrow Welfs and stuff like that. Using die 20, die 10, die 6, those kinds of role playing type games. And you can send her a tweet if you're looking for training on how to do proper incident response tabletops. So, or just little fun little things. So she's doing some workshops with those as well. The podcast you can follow at Breaksec, BRAKESEC, and I'm on Twitter as well at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. And we just had, we finished up InfoSec Campout. Like I said, we've already been working on that. It's going to happen next year in 2022, August 26th to 28th up here in Seattle, same location as this year's. It went really well, and we're looking to expand that out to 50 plus campers. So it'll be pretty fun if you want to come and do a camp out. We're going to be in anything between RVs all the way down to motorcycles and one-person pup tents. So we'll have more information on infosecampout.com coming up, but that's our official website. And cool. So thank you to our Patreon supporters for the money we use to offset domain registration fees, Zoom accounts, hosting, Libsyn, etc. And just time and effort of getting out a weekly podcast. It's very important. Our podcast is always free, and we appreciate all the money in the tip jar that people put in to help support us on that. We have a TPub store. We have a couple of t-shirts over there, and you can also get things like mugs and masks and stickers and such, which are actually pretty good quality t-shirts and stickers. But you can go check that out, tpub.com/user/BDS_podcast. And Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for listening, their continued listenership. We wouldn't have much of a podcast if nobody listened. And, it's important that we have folks like, the caliber of Kim Crawley here coming on, knowing that, her message is going to get out there and people are going to be listening and buying her book. And so if you, have the time and the effort, go get that book. I mean, it counts the CPEs as well. What's that?
Or the need.
Or the need, right? Yeah. These podcasts counts towards like things like CISSP credits. So an hour is a CPE. And, if you need those because you're not able to go to conferences or, you're just not digging the virtual conference thing, podcasts are a very good way of doing that. And they definitely do take them. So anyway, that's it, I think, for Breaking Down Security. Kim, thank you so much for coming on. As always, I would love to talk to you more about Hack the Box and how we might be able to help out with that, if at all possible in the future. If you wanted to come on and talk about blog posts or something, I'd be more than willing to have you on to talk about those things if you'd like.
Hit me up on Twitter.
I will definitely, do so. Mr. Betcher, it's always a pleasure as always, sir. Thank you for coming on. And that was it for Breaking Down Security. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourselves. Get yourselves masked and vaxxed, and wash your hands, you nasties. And, because it's all about taking care of yourselves and everyone around you. We often forget about that. But, one of the big things about taking care of everybody is first taking care of yourself. Because, as we always say here, you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.